In this video, I want to give the most comprehensive overview of guitar tab or tablature that I've ever done. This is going to cover 99% of what you will ever need to be able to read guitar tab and make sense of the tab for the songs that you want to learn. We're also going to cover a little bit of traditional notation, notes on the musical staff with a treble clef, rests and rhythms. We'll be looking at those as we go. But first of all, let's have a quick recap on what tab is. So this is how to play fret 3 on string 1, which is a G note on the thinnest E string. The most common thing people can misread or get wrong with reading tab is reading it upside down. And the best way we can remember this is with tab itself, T-A-B, treble and bass. Treble, or the high notes, are on the physically higher strings when they're written down, and the bass notes, or the lower notes, are on the thicker strings. So this is the 3rd fret on string 1. This is how that note is shown in 2 different ways, and we can see that they are linked. I'm going to be looking down a little bit in this video because I'm looking at my monitor so I can see what you're looking at on screen. So we have up here, we have the treble clef and the 4/4, which is the time signature. The lower part, that's how it's written on tab. When they're linked, this is just showing the same note in 2 different ways. Another example is this, which is how to play middle C, as it's called in traditional notation, but this is the root note of a C chord, the 3rd fret on the A string. Tab doesn't tell us which finger to use for this, it just tells us to hold down and play that one note. The numbers always refer just to fret numbers on the guitar, and this refers to fret 3, for example, played like this. Now that is really all we're going to cover about traditional music notation, about notes on the stave. It is mostly not an advantage to be able to read traditional music notation, i.e. middle C in the notes on the stave, other than being aware of rhythms. And I do want to show you this, which is how rest can be written, because a big thing about, especially at intermediate level, with guitar players is the rhythm in their playing can often suffer just from not being aware of how long to pause for and not being aware of these symbols. So this first one, this is a crotchet rest, this lasts 1 beat. So for example, 1, that length of time from mute of 1 beat, that's that. We have 2 quaver rests there, which kind of look like little number 7s. And then we have a 2-beat rest, which is written as that thick block, and it's resting on the bottom of that line. If it's kind of dangling down, that one would mean it lasts for the whole bar, but that's a lot easier. These are the ones that people tend to need to recognize. And that's it in terms of rests. If you know those, you're going to be good for 90% of music. Well worth your time, just spend a couple of seconds memorizing those so you recognize them in the future. However, for most people, the thing that's going to elevate your guitar game is making sure that you can read rhythms in terms of strumming patterns and something that looks like this. Now, this is a very beginner level one, but it does show the different ways that this can be written in terms of the downs and ups. So down, down, up, down, up, down. In terms of the C chord, that's the chord that you'll be playing for this bar, for example. And you can see those bar lines if you're wondering. Bar line here, bar line, where is it? Just at this side here. That's the length of a musical bar, that vertical line. And then we have these slash lines across the middle of the tab, basically. I mean, this is 5 lines, so this is actually on the stave. This is on traditional notation. And this is how this down, down, up, down, up, down pattern can be written, but in terms of a rhythm. Playing a strumming pattern with the right downs and ups for that pattern is important, but not as important as keeping your hand moving and hitting the right rhythm. And that rhythm is not written in the downs and up. That rhythm is written like this, and it is da, 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 da. That is a beginner level one, so nice and easy. It's with a C chord, and it is down, down, up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, up, down. Here is a similar beginner level strumming pattern, but this one includes a bit of intermediate notation with this tie in the middle. And you can see that there's a D missing from the bottom, even though one's written above, because the middle 2 there are kind of tied together. So this is down, down, up, up, down. You'll recognize that one, right? The old favorite. This is the most common strumming pattern ever. Down, down, up, down, 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 up, down, with a C major chord. You guys have all done this before, but the most important thing that's written there is the rhythm. Da, 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 da. And that is shown by these slashes, the amount of time that's indicated by the lines on those slashes and whether there's a tie together. This is just 2 eighth notes. They're joined together to make them easier to read. So you can see there's 4 eighth notes, but this third one, is tied together with this one. So that is down, down, up, down. This third one, is not heard because it's tied together. That's the intermediate level one I want to make sure that you know. Another rhythm guitar symbol I want to make sure you're aware of is palm muting, PM. This stands for palm muting. It sounds like this. That is an E5 power chord played with the thickest E string and fret 2 of string 5. That outside of the palm of the hand, dampening the strings just here on the inside of the bridge. And that dash showing that happens for the entire bar. If this one was not palm muted, for example, that bit wouldn't have the dash on it and it would start with PM again. So that, for example, would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, where it's lifted off. And that's something that happens in something like Basket Case by Green Day, where there's palm muting, that kind of thing. So if you're aware of how that looks, you can be able to play it. Another symbol with tab we want to be aware of is an X. We're familiar with numbers on tab, but what does the X mean? Well, the X means that string is muted, usually with the chord playing hand. For example, this is 2 strums of an F chord. That's how the F chord's written in tab. And then we relax that chord playing hand and strum exactly the same, but we get this muted sound. And then to play the full bar, that would be strum, strum, mute, strum, 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 mute, strum. You might be familiar with this as the Creedence Clearwater Revival strumming pattern. It's also used in the song Stuck in the Middle with You by Steelers Wheel. This goes. Very tricky one technique-wise to do with the F chord, but it's the only one we've covered at this point in the intermediate course where we're at right now. And we don't want to get a kind of open string sound at all. We do want to make sure just a muted sound. And you can try that with other bar chords when you're ready. And it kind of gets easier, as do a lot of things, when we're around the 3rd and 5th fret. Frets are a little bit closer together, a little bit easier to mute. If we were to do that on one string, say just the first fret of string 6, that would be that pattern kind of repeated. So for example. Here's another late beginner, early intermediate technique that you definitely want to be aware of by now, which is that we don't strum all 6 strings at all times to sound better on guitar. But we can write that in tab as well as having it written just with downs and ups and kind of just being aware of the rhythm. We can write it out properly so we can work this out. This one, for example, is the thickest E string, string 6, played twice, even though the full G chord is held down, and we play that root note, we strum everything, and then thicker couple of strings only, thinner strings only on the up strum. And that is just repeated twice for 1 bar of this pattern. Let me do that one more time, really slow. 1 and 2 and add 3 and 4 and out. And you can kind of read that. Once you see that there's a chord symbol above it, you're just looking at which strings to hit, really. You know the numbers are pretty much there. That one is a big trick that would really elevate most people's game, especially if you're trying to nail strumming patterns such as Wonderwall, or maybe something like Heart of Gold by Neil Young, where we have this exact same thing kind of happening. Great one to test your skills with. Just to show the rhythm as well on that one, here's how that would be written. Yes, with the traditional notation and the downs and ups, and an added, let me try and show you this one on that third strum just here. There's a little arrow on that shows an accent. Here's where we can really feel that accent kind of being in play, and this is just the fullest way to write that. Again, the only thing we're really interested in on this treble clef musical stave is the rhythm, because we can see that we've got 8th notes and then 2 16th notes, just kind of here. Another great thing that tab can show us is exactly which picking motion to use, whether to use a down or an up. And the most common kind of early intermediate picking pattern we want to get is alternate picking. That can be written like this. With the software I was using, which was Soundslice, I wasn't able to get these symbols right next to these ones, kind of where we might expect them. But it's this symbol here. So this first one, kind of the block, is a down pick, and then the V is an up pick. So for example, the part that's written in tab just here goes 0 0 3 0 5 0 3 0. But the tab there is showing, or these symbols, which are tab symbols, but for some reason Soundslice put them near here, is using a down-up motion throughout. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And that's how you'd know, because it's written in those symbols, which is something you don't get. All these little symbols are things you don't get on just tab that's written out in something like Notepad, or that sometimes we see on Ultimate Guitar. That's the advantage of seeing things more complete, such as this. So that's brought me to the end of all the rhythm guitar things and kind of chord playing things that I wanted to show in tab. The rest of this video is going to look at the lead guitar parts, which we typically look at in the context of the jam tracks and the lessons that we offer at andyguitar.co.uk. But I just wanted to totally complete this video and show you a few lead guitar symbols that crop up in tab that you should know at an early intermediate level. Here's how we can do a string bend of a whole tone, which is indicated by the 1. So we can see that we need to play the 8th fret on string 2. So this note we need to bend up by a whole pitch, which is indicated by the 1. So we need to bend it up, not by 1 fret, by 2 frets, because that's a whole tone. That is bending from a G note to an A note. And all that's written in that tab is exactly that, which we'd always want to use, the first 3 fingers working together to get to that pitch. And a whole bend isn't something we typically do on the 3rd string on acoustic, because this is a wound string, it's a bit more difficult. But by using this technique, we can get up there, but we need to make sure it's to that pitch. We can also bend a half a step, which is 1 fret. So this time we're bending the 7th fret up, and we're going to bend it to the pitch of 8. I'm going to again use my 3rd finger and support with the 1st and middle finger as what Paul Gilbert calls the giant 1 finger, or the giant 1st finger, with this twisting motion all done with the wrist. And that's bending to here, not a whole step. It's bending a half step. We can also bend a quarter step, which the most common place that's used in is something called the blues curl. The blues curl is typically used on the minor 3rd, bends up in pitch but physically down a little bit on the inside of this 1st finger. So this is fret 5 on string 3, and then to fret 7, or the root note of like A minor pentatonic. That's the blues curl, and that's an example of a quarter step bend. Another tab symbol I want you to be aware of is the symbol for hammer-ons and pull-offs, also known as flick-offs. This is where the notes are joined together, which is technically known as legato playing, or just a smooth way of playing. But how do we physically do that on guitar? When it's with this symbol and the notes go from a lower note to a higher note, so lower number to a higher number, that is pick 5 on string 2 and hammer on with the third finger, fret 7. And we're trying to get the sound with that hammer on with the third finger, almost like you're picking it. And then when the numbers go down, so from 7 to 5, pick 7, have the first finger already on 5 and flick off to it. 7, 5. So hammer on, pull off or flick off, and no other sound happening, which can be done by muting with the palm of the hand here, and also with the first finger muting around it. The underside of the first finger is muting string 3, and it's also touching string 1. So I can hit other strings around it, but they're not going to ring out because I just want that one string. That wouldn't be tabbed, but that's practically what we do when we're playing those sorts of techniques. All of these lead guitar symbols and techniques are called phrasing. Lead guitar phrasing is how something is played beyond the notes that we're actually playing. And here's another common one. This is sliding. Sometimes this is just shown with the line of the slide, but what this technically shows is fret 5, for example, on string 3 this time, sliding to fret 7, and staying on fret 7 a little longer as shown by the rhythm up here. We can also do this the same, 7 to 5. That's with the first finger. We could do it with the third finger or the middle. The tab doesn't show us which finger to use. How we know which finger to use is done by our general playing ability, adjusting which fingers we use to make most sense for whatever we're playing, or learning the part as the teacher demonstrates it, or like the guy who wrote it plays it. Another common phrasing technique that we can show in tab is vibrato. Vibrato, it kind of sounds like vibration, right? We're vibrating the string, but what we're really doing is adjusting the pitch higher and back to pitch. It's lots of little string bends. So I would do the 8th fret here, probably first of all with the third finger, supporting with the middle and first finger, again one giant finger. Same string bending technique, but what we do is... So it's like lots of quarter tone bends. You can do bigger vibrato, but typically that's how we want to do it. Now, if we want to do this vibrato with our first finger, we need to do it with the inside of the first finger, not with the flat part at the top. This side, kind of like this, and we just do lots of little string bend techniques. Wrist going up, fingers actually staying pretty still, and we want to get used to doing it slow and fast. Much easier to do on electric guitar with some amount of overdrive or sustain, or with an overdrive pedal, because we have more sustain of the note. On acoustic guitar, even with a vibrato, the note's going to die out a lot quicker, but we can still do it on acoustic, and I love demoing this stuff on acoustic because you guys can do all this as well. Don't leave it to the electric. We're coming to the end now, and this is where we're starting to combine techniques. So here we have the full tone, shown by the 1, string bend, with vibrato. Now sometimes the vibrato can start after the string bend. This one would kind of go, kind of like that. This is one of the hardest things to nail, and if you don't play guitar for a little while, or you don't do this often on acoustic, which I'll be honest, I don't. I do this more on electric. That's how this is shown in tab. Very difficult. That's something we'd be looking at more late intermediate to advanced level, but that's how it's written in tab. We can also do a little bit of string bending and even vibrato on pairs of strings. This is something that I would play like this. So we could do that pushing up as well, or down. We'd normally bend into the neck. So if we're on the outer strings, we'd bend towards the middle, but you can do this either way, and I can think of situations where I do it either way. But we want to use the third and little finger string bending technique with the rest of our hand, kind of going into the guitar neck like this. And that's that, bending up, and then indeed back down, shown by those. Here's those same notes, but shown with vibrato, which is just vibrating those two notes. We could do this with any fingers really, but I find I get a good purchase with the third and little finger, and that enables me to be in kind of A minor pentatonic position. Now let's have a look at an example phrase that uses all of those lead guitar techniques. This isn't something to master right now. At this point in my intermediate course, we haven't looked at everything that's going to enable you to nail every part of this. What I am doing is introducing what all those components are and giving you one example of how we can put them together. Looking at lead guitar at this kind of level is the actual thing we do in my lead guitar courses, which are a whole separate program on the website, andyguitar.co.uk, all my lead guitar program. But what's the essential bits you need to be able to recognize in tab and the techniques to learn? Here they are. So here's our example of how we're stringing some of these lead guitar techniques together in the tab, including a little mute just here. And here's how this is played. So 8 bent up. We have 7, a mute, 7 half bend up, back down, pick 5, 7, 5, quarter bend up, vibrato. One last time. So hopefully that has answered many questions you might have had about tab, but it will have inevitably brought up some new questions. This is where asking questions on the live streams that we do every week at andyguitar.co.uk/live and getting help through the Andy Guitar Discord, where I can answer and also other members can join in and help too to get peer-to-peer support. That is where that really crops in, because this video has been made to cover a wide spectrum of stuff. It's really at an intermediate level, and many people will be watching that video and thinking, oh, that's totally new. I haven't covered any of this stuff. I feel like I know nothing. I want to stop. And that is not what I want to encourage. That is why I do these videos so infrequently, because it's not the best way to learn it all in one go. I did want to just provide one video that just answered all those questions about what all these squiggly lines mean on tab, how it should be written as opposed to how you might often see things written on sites like Ultimate Guitar, where it's just not laid out how you would do it. And then you can recognize when tab might be indeed wrong when you're looking at tab online. Hopefully that's answered a lot of your questions, but you can get more help on the community Discord right now and at the live streams, andyguitar.co.uk/live. The links are down below. I hope to see you over there, and I hope to see you there real soon.